Please note, this episode contains discussions of situations or themes that some may find emotionally distressing.
Dad wasn't feeling well, and it was very clear to me, even as a 10-year-old, that something terrible was happening. I almost stopped being a child. I felt that there was a massive shift. I think I'd always had a sense of responsibility. I think my childhood ended there, really. Your 3 children have a disease with no treatment or cure. They will die before they're 20. It's just any parent's worst nightmare. And I think in that moment, this can't be right.
In this episode of the SuperPower Podcast, I'm joined by the extraordinary Paula Naughton, a devoted mother, nurse, and relentless advocate for families affected by Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy. With a career spanning oncology and mental health, Paula has always been driven by a passion for improving healthcare and ensuring the best standards of care for those who need it most. But her world changed forever when all 3 of her sons, Archie, George, and Isaac, were diagnosed with Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, a rare and devastating muscle wasting disease. Determined to fight for their future, Paula and her husband founded the Join Our Boys Trust in 2014, dedicated to funding research, improving care, and ultimately finding a cure. Tragically, in 2022, they suffered an unbearable loss when Archie passed away at just 16 years old. Yet through the immense grief, Paula continues to fight, not just for George and Isaac, but for all families facing the same battle. This is a story of resilience, love, and the unbreakable power of a mother's determination. Join us as we dive into Paula's extraordinary journey today. Paula, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I have a new saying. Yeah.
Go on.
I'm living the dream.
Ah.
And I think that I think it's a really positive mindset.
Yeah.
And I think more than ever now, when you turn on the news, I think we all appreciate. I hope people appreciate more that we do. We are really living the dream. We have everything we need, most of our shelter.
Yeah.
Warmth, food, and hopefully some, important people in our lives. So I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for today.
So too, I think it's something perspective. I think it's helped me a lot, and I think it's really important. As you say, you see the news and it just makes you grateful, but also makes you want to do more to help other people, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Makes you very angry.
I know, it does. Well, before we get into the present day, obviously, I'm known for just going all the way back on this show, Paula. And just before we started, we filled in the graph of life. And without going into the details of it, how was that for you?
No, I think any reflective exercise is really, really important.
Yeah.
I mean, as you know, I work in mental health, and we always talk about, when we're talking about recovery, we say, oh, please don't dwell in the past, it'll make you depressed. Don't think about the future, it'll make you anxious. Be in the present. But I think sometimes we're missing a trick, because if you don't have the opportunity to reflect on your past and those experiences of what have formed you, your character and your resilience and your ability to cope with the pressure of life and the mundane at times, then you're almost losing part of yourself. So I think it's very important, but I think life is so crazy that often we don't reflect at times when things are good for us. We do that when things go wrong, and this caused this, that, and so I think it was lovely to have a piece of time to just think.
It's true, because I often think that, hindsight is the best insight. And actually we learn by looking back, and it kind of makes a better person as well. And I suppose just going all the way back then to your earliest childhood memory, what is that memory? What comes to mind?
There are actually 2 memories, if that's okay, because they're kind of linked. We had moved from Wales, and where I was born, and we were living at the Angel in Islington with my grandmother. We called her Nanny, my mum's mum, who was the most extraordinary lady and had massive influence on my life. And we were all living there. My parents were trying to find a house. And Nanny took me to the London Palladium to see Cinderella. Oh. And I just thought this was the swishest thing ever. And I had long white boots, and I had a navy blue coat. And we went somewhere to eat. And I can't remember, but I imagine it was on Oxford Street. It was probably John Lewis or BHS, one of those kind of restaurant places. But to me, it was just, I might as well have been in, the Ritz. And shortly afterwards, it was my birthday. And my parents bought me a Silver Cross Dolls pram. And why I'm telling you this is because I think this was such a formative experience for me and why I remember it so clearly. In the pram was a black doll. And my dad had travelled all over the world. He'd been in the Merchant Navy. And for my birthday, as well as getting the pram and the doll, I was given probably the greatest lesson in my life. And that was all about, we're giving you this doll because it's really important that you understand that we are all the same. It doesn't matter where you come from in the world, what you were born into, everyone is equal. Mm-hmm. And I remember for years and years and years, I was the only person that had a black doll and I loved her so much. And Daddy had said to me, everyone else is going to have dolls with blue eyes and blonde hair, but you have to understand that that isn't the real world. And I think that was so important for me. And so often in my life, I've been in situations where people will have beliefs and say things, and I understand why, because that's where they've come from. Mm-hmm. But having come from a different place with a different philosophy about humanity, I think it gives you an edge of being able to be a bit of a peacemaker in situations and also valuing diversity.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the greatest gifts that we have after love to value diversity.
It is, and I guess that's going to, as you said, it's one of the greatest lessons you had because it's shaped things probably in later life of understanding difference and uniqueness. And then I suppose from that childhood memory then, as the years went by, I know when you filled in the graph there, 0 to 10 looked great, very, very happy.
Very happy.
Going to see Cinderella, lots of good stuff's happening. But then at the age in your teen years then, what happened?
Well, the first thing that happened, it was actually, I remember being 10 years old and it was a Saturday night, Sunday morning, and my mum called me and I was very close to both my parents, but I was the only girl. And so, I was a bit of a daddy's girl. And my dad wasn't feeling well and my mum called me to help. Okay. And we were trying to be very quiet because my 2 little brothers were asleep. And it was very clear to me, even as a 10-year-old, that something terrible was happening. And we were trying to hold my dad up because he was sliding. He couldn't stand up. And we managed to get him back into bed. And we didn't realize until the morning, we knew he was very sick. He'd had a heart attack. And as a child, it was terrifying. But I think that's really where I almost stopped being a child. I felt that there was a massive shift and that I think I'd always had a sense of responsibility, but suddenly I think my childhood ended there really again, to be honest, and he recovered and he lived for another 4 years, but then in September 2014, he just died. He had a massive heart attack and died. And we were just devastated. I was very good at languages at school, and the new school year had just started. And if you wanted to, you could do an extra language. You could do third language. And I chosen to do Italian. And I went to the first evening. It was an evening class in a sixth form college. And I went to the first class and I loved it. And I remember the phrase I learned was "Ecco una chiave." I think it's "here is the key."
Right.
But I never went back because that night when I got home, my dad died. I'd been home for 10 minutes. I went to see him and he died. He had a massive heart attack.
And you were 14 at the time? I was
14.
And then I guess at home there was then you, mum, your 2 younger brothers, you said as well, right?
Yeah.
And then so already you were saying between the age of 10 and 14 had to grow up pretty sharply. And then I guess that just propelled as the years went on, right?
Yeah.
And then tell me a little bit then, as the years did go by and you finished off school, you later then met your now husband.
Yeah.
Just tell me a little bit about meeting your husband, and you're both nurses, am I not wrong?
Yeah, so we had both qualified as general nurses, and I had was working in oncology, adult oncology and pediatric oncology, and really loving it. It's very, very challenging, but I worked in a specialist centre and it was really amazing in the middle of London. And I felt that, we should be doing more around the psychology of diagnosis, of treatment, of, maybe being given a terminal diagnosis. So I said, I want to go and train to do mental health, and I can bring all of that back and it'll help the team. And my husband had been working in an A&E out in Hertfordshire, and we met doing this course. And I didn't really like him at first. I didn't really like him at first, but it's very interesting about how I came to like him. There was only 10 of us on this course, so we were all postgraduate students. And for some reason, the lecturer we were supposed to have she'd had to extend her maternity leave. So we had a different lecturer. And, as we were qualified, so it's not like we were kind of 18-year-old students. We were all kind of in our mid-20s, some were 30. And it became very evident to me that this poor lady wasn't terribly well herself. And for some reason, she took an instant dislike to my husband. And although I didn't like him, I couldn't cope with the fact that he was being persecuted, because we go back to the everybody's equal and should be treated with dignity and respect. And so I got the others together and we kind of managed that situation. And in the course of that, Porrick and I spent a lot of time together because we had to write letters, we had to meet other lecturers, we had to, meet people in the university and all of those things. And we became really, really good friends. So, I changed my opinion of him.
It's interesting that, though, isn't it? I often find that if I'm with people, I try not to be too judgmental, but we are who we are. And you think, do I take a dislike in someone?
Yeah.
Actually, oftentimes, it can go a whole 360 or 180.
Yeah.
And then you flip into actually liking them, or in this case, marrying them.
Yes, it's crazy. Yeah,
and so you meet on the course, the years go by, and then you go on to have 3 wonderful sons. Of course, Archie was born in 2005.
That's right.
And then the twins sometime later. And just paint a picture pre-2012. Tell us a little bit about Archie, George, Isaac. Just tell us a little bit more about life.
Because of what had happened with my dad, and then my lovely nanny died 2 years later, we dealt with a lot of grief. And I kind of took the attitude that, seize the day and, we're only here for a little time. And so it was always very, very positive. And if someone had said to me, what are your life ambitions? It was always, I'd love to do a job where I can be of service and of value to people and make things better and contribute to society. And I'd really like to be a mother. They were my 2 kind of wishes in life, and of course the third is do no harm, consciously do no harm. So when we found out what had happened is Porrick's poor parents had been very sick, and we'd made an agreement we would go and live in Ireland for 6 months to help my sister-in-law look after them. And we did that at the beginning of 2005, and I got pregnant with Archie. And I remember I told Porrick he was driving a tractor and we were going down to the bog, and it was a beautiful evening, and I told him, and he just stopped the tractor. He couldn't believe, he was so happy. And we were so happy, and we said, you know what, we'll stay and have Archie in Ireland. And because there was still things, we liked being able to help his parents and being there. And so Archie was born early in 2005. He should have been born in 2006. He was a Christmas baby. And the name Archie means courageous and truly bold, as in brave. And if I say so myself, he was incredibly well named, very well named, because when he was 2, he nearly died. He had pneumonia, septicemia, meningitis. And it's an absolute miracle he lived, an absolute miracle. And he was our greatest teacher. And George and Isaac were born in 2010. An amazing gift to have 1 child, but to have 2. And they're identical twins. And just Archie idolized them. He was 4.5 years older than them, but they were like the 3 musketeers. They were, and life was very good. We were working. We were still in Ireland. We had a nice home. We lived in a lovely community. And in the summer of 2012, we were meeting friends from London in Cork, and we had a holiday together. And I remember saying then, it was August 2012, we are so lucky, like we have everything and we have nothing to complain about. And, the next few years is going to be so exciting. We'll be able to take, my friend has a son, a little bit older than Archie, Alex. We'll be able to take them on holidays around Europe. We can take them up mountains. And we had all these dreams about the adventures we could have with our children.
And so that was 2012 and you're on that holiday with your friends. And so at this point, Archie, the boys, they're doing their thing. They're on holiday, running around, being boys. Then, of course, things took a turn in 2012. Just tell me about what happened and I suppose how this moment almost changed things going forward.
I suppose in order to explain that, I just need to go back a little bit, that after Archie regained consciousness from meningitis, if you're at that precipice and you're told that we'll know by Tuesday if your child is going to live or die, and this is Sunday, you do a lot of bargaining with God. You do or whatever you believe in. And you start off saying things like, I don't care if he's blind and deaf, and I don't care if he loses a limb, I just want him to live. But then, the bit of you that's human kicks in. And so then they wake up and you're like, oh, please let him not be deaf. Please don't let him be blind. Please don't let him lose a limb. Please. So Archie was very, very fortunate. He was only left with a residual limp, which of course everybody, including us, all the specialists, put down to meningitis. So he had a lot of physio and OT and doing really, really well. Sports mad. He was, any opportunity to be up in a harness, up a wall, he was the first in the queue. And we just said, we'll just have to, just keep doing what we're doing. But then we noticed, it was in that summer on the holiday that Isaac was really struggling to get off of the floor. And I spoke to my friend who's a public health nurse, like a health visitor in Ireland. And she said, oh, he's just a lazy twin. And I said, really? And she said, oh, yeah, it exists, which I thought was a bit odd. But anyway,
He's about 2 at this point, 1.5, 2.
He's 2.
2, yeah.
Yeah, he was 2 in the May. So anyway, it carried on. And George was fine. George was getting off the floor. So I was thinking, I just wonder. So we took him to a physio, and the physio said he needs to see a paediatrician. And of course, the paediatrician we were seeing was the paediatrician who'd saved Archie's life. And we've been seeing him regularly anyway. An amazing, amazing man. And when we were in that clinic and he came out and he looked at us, I knew something was very wrong, because this is the man that had come and sat with me at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Over the month, Archie was very sick and spoken to me and had been researching about things and trying to help Archie the best he could. And I knew that something was really wrong just by his face. And he examined the boys and he said, Paula, and Porrick was there because we tend to travel as a pack, the 5 of us. And he said, look, it could be his nerves, because he was looking at Isaac, but I think it's his muscles. And I said, but you have to remember he's an identical twin. And his face just fell even more then, because we now then had the possibility of the 3 boys having something wrong. So that was a Tuesday. And on Thursday, they had blood tests. And he phoned Friday morning and said, can you come in at 2:00? It was the 9th of November. And it was a really grey day in every way, So we drove to the hospital, me, Porrick, George and Isaac in their little baby seats. And I remember saying to Porrick, do you think we should just keep driving? Because we were going to Galway. Should we just keep driving and just go into Galway Bay? Because I know what they're going to say. First of all, Porrick said, you don't know that. Mm. But of course I'd Googled, even though he told me not to Google.
And you knew.
And it was a checklist. It was a checklist, Gian. It was just a checklist. And Porrick said, I remember this so clearly, he said to me, you're just being irrational, Paula. God would never let that happen to us because we've helped so many other people. And by the way, he said, we can't drive into Galway Bay because Archie's at school. I'd forgotten he wasn't in the car. Yeah. And that's not to make anything light of somebody talking about, driving all their family into the sea. But that's how sure I was that something was very wrong. So we got to the hospital, we got into the room, and again, I felt so sorry for the doctor when he walked in, because it was like he just had the weight of the world on his shoulders. And he said, "I'm really sorry, Paula and Porrick, but Archie, George and Isaac have something called Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy." And armed with my Google knowledge, I said, "Dr. Curran, is that DMD?" And he said, "I'm afraid so." And he was very positive, but I had an actual out-of-body experience.
Really?
And I remember looking down at Porrick, and he was ashen, and the boys were asleep, and they looked like two angels. And I think in that moment I realised, like, this can't be right. You know, it's 2012, and you're basically telling us our children have a disease that has no treatment or cure, and it's a catastrophic disease. Yeah, so it was shocking to hear it, but it wasn't a surprise.
Because
of Mr. Google, Dr. Google, that we tell everyone not to look at, obviously. And I don't know if we did the right thing. Again, you know, when you look back, I think we did the only thing that we knew how to do. So we went to the school to collect Archie. The consultant had said he was going to refer us to the national specialist in Dublin, and that he would definitely help us. It was Friday evening, we collected Archie from school. We went in and told Archie's teachers, because we'd explained to the principal and his class teacher what was happening. And they were just so devastated, like, amazing school.
Yeah.
And we went home. We told our next door neighbour, who's our family really,
Sure.
Amazing lady, Marion. We told her, and we told nobody else. And on Monday we went to work.
Wow.
And
why did you not tell anybody else?
Because it was almost surreal.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was like, and also I think there was a lot of fear that if we stopped, we would never get going again.
Yeah.
And that again, it's that thing about being mindful, isn't it? In that time, the children didn't know anything. They were babies.
Yeah. But Archie was about 6 at this point,
He
right?
was 6, yeah. And we explained to him that,
Okay.
you know, the doctor had said there's something wrong with his muscles, all of their muscles. And I suppose as a 6-year-old, there's safety in numbers. It wasn't just him. It was his brothers too. And that we were going to see what we could do about that.
Yeah.
And, you know, Archie... It's very difficult to describe Archie, like, because nothing fazed him. And more as time goes on and the more I learn about death, I'm convinced he had a near-death experience when he was 2, because Archie reassured us. So he would say things like, if he ever saw me getting upset, which I'd rarely do in front of him, but of course, given the situation, things would happen, you know, and I might not realise he was nearby, and he would hold my face in his hands, and he'd look at me with these big blue eyes and say, "Mummy, don't worry, everything's going to be all right." He was like, he had so much knowledge about what was important.
Yeah.
And he never sweated what I would call the little stuff that I think us lesser mortals can sometimes get distracted by. He was a very unique child, and I don't just say that because I was his mother, but so many people have said that to us. And because of his situation, Archie met some of the most amazing people in the world, and nothing fazed him. If it was a president or prime minister or an international rugby player or a musician, a famous musician, he met the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yes.
And he just the people said, "Oh, they might not be able to spend very long with you." He spent an hour and a half with them. And he was, there was just something about Archie. I don't mean to sound conceited at all, but he was a special boy.
Very special. And I think then as the boys grew up then, so Archie was 6 at the time, obviously the twins were 2, and just looking at almost the next 10 years from 2012, everybody's growing up. Archie's the older brother. The boys start to speak, to listen, to interact. What was day-to-day life like for you as a family?
I now say that we've had 3 lives. So we had BD, which was before Duchenne, and then we have AD, which was after Duchenne. And then we have, ADD, which is now, AAD, sorry, which is now, okay? So after Duchenne, I would describe it, the only way I can describe it is that imagine you're walking around with a veil, like a net curtain, a fine net curtain.
Oh.
So I can still see you. I can still see the aura of you, the glow of you. I can see everything in this room. But it's slightly faded. It's slightly diminished. And sometimes I think I've confused myself because I would say Duchenne has diminished us and our opportunities in life. But actually that isn't true. Our view of the day-to-day has become diminished because of this veil. But Duchenne has given us, a superpower in a way, to coin the name of the podcast. It completely changed it. To be told that your 3 children have a disease with no treatment or cure, and in all possibility and likelihood, they will die before they're 20. And before that, they'll become paralyzed and they won't be able to even turn themselves in bed or scratch their nose or walk or move or do anything. Is just so horrific and any parent's worst nightmare that I think you actually have to consciously make a decision that you are going to make every day the best that you can for them. I think.
Yeah.
I think so.
And and I guess that was such a balance for you of one, living with the reality. And you talk about in the moment grief quite a lot, whilst also being hopeful for the future. I mean, it's such this paradox, right? And I've also read about Duchenne that as you get older, you get weaker, whereas most teenagers, you think you get older, you get stronger.
Yeah.
All of this is going on. Tell me a bit more about this in the moment grief. What did you mean by that? 'Cause you've mentioned that before.
So I think that, it's, you have to learn to live with grief. And so many people have experience of tragedy in their life. And I think, before I answer that question, I just want to make this point because I think it's really important. Almost on a weekly basis, somebody will be telling me about their grief experience. And I'm very interested, obviously, professionally. Before all of this, I would have been interested. But obviously now, I have more of a personal interest in it. But the thing that really disappoints me for people is they will always say, almost without exception, but your grief is much worse than mine. And I always say to them, please don't diminish your grief. Do not diminish your grief. Yeah. Your grief belongs to you. And they say, no, but I haven't lost a child. And I think it isn't about who you lose and when you lose them. It's always about the fundamental basis of your relationship. Always. So sometimes you will hear people say, oh, that person's having a very abnormal grief reaction. I've heard this at work, but a very normal grief reaction. Their auntie's died. But their auntie was the most significant person in their life. Yeah. So who are we to decide what's normal and what's... Now, there are clinical measures of what is an abnormal grief reaction, and treatment protocols and things. But sometimes it's just allowing people that space to acknowledge, this is horrendous for me and it's had a terrible impact on my life. Yeah. And I think grief is no different to any other adversity in our life. So much is about what capacity we have to deal with that, what resources we have to deal with that. And a lot of that often is who is around you. It's what's within you, but also who is around you and who can you call on. And there's that lovely saying about, your best friends are people that notice when you go quiet, for example. They're your real people. They're your circle of influence and the people that know you the best. Yeah. But to go back to your question is, what does it look like? It looks like getting up in the morning, putting your 2 feet on the ground and doing your best to stand up and to stay upright. And the risk of that, living the life that we live now, is I think we fill it with too much, because then we don't have to think too much about the enormity of it.
As in, you're busy, you're doing things all the time.
Yeah. And that's why that little visualization you did earlier with me, it was just so lovely, because I was thinking, gosh, when have I done this before? For such a long time. So I think there is a real risk that you neglect your own well-being, but also there's a real fear that if I stop, I might not be able to get up again. And I think as a parent, that has a more complex layer to it, because you are responsible for these young people.
And Paula, I just think, and again, and I hear this a lot, every story is unique, every grief journey is different in its own right, should never be compared. But, if we meet people who perhaps have had somebody in their family or themselves indeed diagnosed with a terminal illness, let's say, and they've been given a time period to live, we often hear that they then want to live every day, right? You mentioned, obviously, in 2012, that Friday afternoon in November, you were given that news. Has that changed the way you mentioned seize the day, you're living the dream? Does that make you appreciate time with your boys every single day more?
You see, I am just so in love with my children from the day they were born. Do you know, I think we have such immense gratitude that we were able to have our children, that they are really remarkable. They're just, I mean, all children are a gift. They're really magical. I think children are so magical. And they have such a perspective on the world, and I always say, people say to me and Para, you're just so amazing. You're both so amazing. And I say, but we just follow our children. We follow their lead. Do you know, children tend to live in the moment, especially in the early years. And it's very difficult to be miserable around, vibrant, energetic, highly intelligent, very curious young men. Yeah. And that's what they are. And you can put the 3 of those children, we could put them in any room with anyone and they can have a conversation. Yeah. Do you know? And I think that they have probably packed so much into their young lives and had so many experiences. But I like to think we would have done that anyway.
Yeah.
I like to think we've always been very big into travel and education, all of those, cultural experiences and, understanding diversity, as I said earlier. So I think we would have done a lot of those things. Yeah. But for example, I wouldn't be sitting here with you now if the boys didn't have Duchenne, because we never would have met. I wouldn't have met Larry if it was Monet, our cousin, that introduced us to Larry, and then Larry introduced us to Hussein, and then we met. And there's so many stories like that, do you know?
And I think that's, as you clearly do, seeing the positives in every experience. There's so many blessings that come from it. And obviously we met in May of 2022 in London at Hussein's book launch. And Archie was, of course, there as well. Yeah. And May 22 to July 22, things changed again for you. And we look at your graph of life again and this journey, this roller coaster that is life for all of us. But just tell me about the time between May 22, when we first met with Archie, and then what happened in July.
So we'd come for that week really unexpectedly. You'll remember we didn't even tell Hussein we were coming. Yeah, I remember. And we literally rolled in and Hussein makes this big announcement, doesn't he, at his book launch. I don't believe it. Join our boys. And I was like, oh, Hussein, please. Yeah. And because he's so amazing. And then he wanted us to go up there and speak. And we had the best week. We met some people from that evening, came and spoke to us as well as yourself. And we went to Dr. Bird in Chelsea, went to the clinic there, and we met loads of family and friends. And on the way actually, Larry and Hussein came to our friend's house where we were staying, and we had a takeaway. And Archie got sick. And we just thought, oh, it's just the food. But then this started happening every day. So we took him for investigations at home, and he wasn't getting any better, and they couldn't find out what was wrong. And I kept saying to every doctor we met, 6 of them, in a 4-week period, is it his heart? He has Duchenne. Is this a presentation of cardiac failure? No, it's not. Anyway, we were booked to go to Colombia to see a doctor. And Archie wasn't well enough to travel, but Archie wanted me to bring the boys. So we made a deal that Archie would stay at home with Porrick and I would bring the boys to Colombia. Now, as you can imagine, logistically, taking 2 boys in wheelchairs to Colombia was, an adventure to say the least. But of course, all I was thinking about was Archie. And I just knew there was something seriously wrong with him. So while we were away, he ended up in an adult coronary care unit because they have decided where we live, the 16-year-olds are adults.
Right.
So from Colombia, I was trying to make the point, he's a child. He needs to be under the care of a paediatrician and a cardiologist. They'd realised it was his heart. And he ended up, the day before we came back from Colombia, he ended up in an adult coronary care unit in Dublin. And the plan was, in Dublin, they'd got all of the information and Archie was going there to be treated and sorted out. And I arrived there and Porrick was waiting for me at the lift. And he said, Archie's going to die. They just told me he's going to die. And I said, Porrick, of course he's not going to die. Do you know, I didn't know what time it was because I'd just come back from Colombia. And I said, that can't be right. And I went in and I saw Archie. And I was like, oh my God, I think he's going to die. And he was so happy to see me. And I was so happy to see him. And we met with a consultant the next day. And she said there was nothing they could do. That his heart was too damaged. It was Duchenne. His lungs were too damaged. And that he was going to die. And she asked what we wanted. And I said, we need support from the Children's Hospice for George and Isaac. And we need Archie to be at home. And they said, that can't happen. And I think this goes back to being a child and being so well supported and fighting for your convictions. I said, no, he has to go home. Well, the drug he's having, it's called dopamine, is only given, in high dependency areas. And I said, but I'm a nurse. I haven't been a general nurse for a long time, but I'm sharp. I can remember. You can teach me. Anyway, she said no. And that was on the Friday. And on Monday, a different consultant came who just come back from America. And I said the same thing to her. And she said, oh no, we're not allowed to do that. And she was called Katie. And I said, Katie, you keep asking me, what do we want? And I'm telling you, our son wants to go home. He wants to be at home. And at this point, we hadn't had the conversation with Archie, that he was going to die. And actually, he told us he was going to die, it turned out. But so Katie said to me, do you have a good pharmacist? And I said, we have everything in Roscommon. Anything we need, we can get, because we have an amazing community. And she said, let me make some calls, have some meetings. And we set it up that Archie was going to go home on the Thursday. Oh. And I spent the day being trained and all of this. But on that Monday, I said to her, we have to tell him. Yeah. We have to tell him. We have to be honest with him. And we were very lucky that we were both able to be there because our friends, Louise and Anne, were, between them, they were looking after George and Isaac, which was no easy feat, because of their situation. But on Monday, Porrick went down to get us coffees and Archie a cold drink. And Archie looked at me and he said, Mama, I'm really, really sorry, but I think I'm going to have to die. So I wanted to understand, I knew, but I wanted to understand, And I said, why do you think that? And he said, I'm just so tired of this now. And I said to him, you have to do what you have to do, but we'll try and get you home to do that. And he said, I'd really like to be in my own room. And our lovely neighbours had all gone in, because we were in the middle of moving house. We were supposed to be moving. So the house was full of boxes and a complete tip, really. And our neighbours had gathered together and they'd moved everything out into sheds They'd emptied Archie's room. They'd painted it that kind of Chelsea blue because he was a mad Chelsea fan. The nurses had got the bed for him. The house was filled with balloons on Wednesday evening, and we were due to leave on Thursday morning. And at 2 a.m. Archie died.
In the hospital.
In the hospital. And he was 16, and he was in an adult coronary care unit. And as lovely as the staff were, they just didn't know how to manage his symptoms and manage him, really. And it was a travesty for lots of reasons, but and that's why we have a third life now, which we call AAD, which is after Archie's death. Yeah, so it's a different life again. Yeah.
And I guess on top of everything there, as you say, Archie's 16. And this is what's wild about life, right? Is I'd met you in the May for the first time with Archie, and then how life could turn in July. At this point, the twins are at home.
Yeah.
And I suppose you're managing the in-the-moment grief of Archie, and now about to also have to sit the boys down. And only if you're comfortable sharing, all of this, because it's so much, just how that was for you, because you've then got the two younger boys looking up to their courageous warrior brother, obviously.
Yeah.
It's hard to get into the mindset of George and Isaac, who are these, fellow warriors, how that was for them.
I think what was really difficult was because Archie was like such a great protector of his brothers.
Yeah.
He called them the twinnies. And he refused to see them when he was dying. He refused because he was protecting them. And there were 4 or 5 people he asked to see, and they all came. They all came to see him in those final days, which was amazing that they came. And I suppose Archie, he had a lot of adult friends as well as his school friends. So we were very lucky that our dear friend Coach Gleason came to collect me in Porrick. And our local undertaker is an amazing man, Pat Smith. He came up very quickly to get Archie. His son was in nursery with Archie. So he'd known Archie all his life. And he'd helped us a lot with the trust. So, we know him. And so we went, I remember it so clearly. I was in the back of the car and I was making a sign that would be printed, Court would print to put on our front door to explain that the house was private. Because in Ireland, funerals are managed very differently.
Right.
They happen within 3 or 4 days. Okay. And there are hundreds of people involved. It's a culturally different experience. And so my big concern was, how do we keep the house private? And how do we get to the boys before anyone else tells them? Obviously, we told Anne and Louise and our families, but we hadn't told anyone else. And I remember saying to Pat Smith on the phone, how are we going to manage this? And he said, you won't. He said, you won't manage it, because once one person knows, everyone knows. So it was on social media. We hadn't said anything, and people had been so generous, like praying for Archie, lighting candles for Archie, having masses for Archie. And we just had to get to the boys. So we had to go and tell them. And I just think they were so shocked, because although they knew he was sick, in their minds, Archie was coming home today. To be in the house. He wasn't supposed to be coming home in a coffin. That isn't what they had woken up to that day, But they were just so stoical about it all and so courageous. And again, I suppose when you see young people who are going through so much, just enduring it with such dignity, you have no place as an adult to be falling apart. That isn't. So I busied myself into organising the best music, organising the booklets, and writing a eulogy for him. that's what I did. And then Porrick did the practical things that enable me to do that.
And again, the boys, you mentioned Stoic, the two of them just absolutely incredible. And I follow you guys constantly now, and seeing them speak up and everything they do, it's amazing. But I think just switching this to you a second, whether that's as a mother, as a human, as Paula, you mentioned that you busy yourself a lot. Whether that's a coping mechanism or it is what it is, but it's not easy to deal with uncertainty day to day. You know, you've mentioned that there's no cure, there's nothing that can change this as we look ahead. Your average person struggles to deal with change, moving house, dealing with any form of change, if I'm honest with you. Not everybody, but a lot of people fear
Yeah,
change.
of
You
course.
deal with uncertainty constantly. How do you deal with that other than busying yourself? Because I'm just trying to get into your mindset and learn from you.
I think I'm really very, very lucky that I think, first of all, I think the family I came from, my grandmother's family were all naval people, and we're in the First and Second World War, and there's a massive work ethic in my family. No one's going to come and rescue you. You just have to, whatever happens, you are it.
Yeah.
You are the person that can change this. And you have to make very clear decisions when you're facing adversity. And you can sink or you can swim, and I think, so that was kind of the mentality I came from, I grew up in. And that anything is possible, anything is possible. And then the other thing I think that's really saved me and Porrick is our professional training. I think if you have been in psychiatric intensive care units with men that are 6'7", and you learn very quickly that they're going to listen to you faster than they'll listen to some of your male colleagues because you speak a bit more quietly, or you're female, that you can have a lot of influence on people that, might be bashing other people up because of their level of distress. You learn very quickly that actually I can negotiate with anybody, really, and I just need that bit of confidence to do that. And then I think my husband is he's very solid. He came from a very solid family and is very good at taking responsibility for his children. He's an amazing father, amazing, incredible. So, and we live in an amazing community. So I think all of those four kind of stools are really helpful.
And you mentioned that a lot, I think, the community, throughout everything in those 3 chapters, actually, how important that is and how important they are. Just, I suppose, looking at community, you've now gone on to build your own community, Join Our Boys. Just tell us a little bit more about Join Our Boys. I mean, I obviously follow you every single day. You've got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are behind you, celebrities, everyday people. Just tell us a bit more about it and the mission of Join Our Boys as well.
So what happened in January 2013, we went to the national specialist. And we were so hopeful, Gian. Oh my God, we were filled with hope that day. And I had, in those kind of 5-6 weeks before that, I'd been in touch with scientists, researchers, drug companies, everyone. I went armed with all these papers. And our local paediatrician had been helping me, and, it's about hope and being positive. And we got to this clinic, and it was such a disaster because we were there for about 4 hours. And at the end of it, the consultant had examined the boys and a nurse took the boys out. And the consultant, this is the national lead, he put his head in his hands and he said, "Paula Porrick, the best advice I can give you is go home and love your children." And I was so incensed. Thanked him for his time and left. Didn't say anything else. And I said to Porrick when we left, we're going to have to do this ourselves. We're going to have to go out there and we're going to have to tell the world about this disease. How did we not know about it as nurses? We never even heard of it. If people knew about this disease, they would help us. I know they would, and they'd help all the other families. And in the conservatory between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m. for weeks, I carved out the concept of the Join Our Boys Trust. And that's how it happened. And it's another job, really. It's a full-time job. And we, because of the generosity of the general public, we've been able to give hundreds of thousands of euros to research. We've had 2 international conferences in Dublin. We were kind of halted by COVID, and we need to get back onto that particular pony, I think. But, and there is hope. There are treatments, in America, there's a treatment there for some children. There is a treatment that should be available for the majority of children in the UK very, very soon.
Okay.
But the challenge we would have personally is so much damage is already done to George and Isaac. So I'm very hopeful for the next generation of children. Really, really hopeful. Unfortunately, nothing has come in time for our children. So our mission now is to try and protect their hearts and their lungs, and, in the hope that they can stay alive and that maybe in the future there will be a cure for the disease. But it's so complicated. It's not really a one bullet treatment. And it's, I just feel so much for anybody who's being diagnosed today. But I would say to them, the landscape is very different to how it was 13 years ago. And I would have great hope for them and their children.
Which is tremendous change in 13 years, right? In the grand scheme of things, of helping others. And if people are listening, how can they support Join Our Boys?
Our biggest following will be on Instagram. And the boys, do campaigns on there, and they like to support the people that have supported them. So they do videos and things like that. And it's on Instagram, it's at joinourboys_. Or you can go and have a look on the website, which is joinourboys.org. Or just, even if you just educated yourself around what Duchenne muscular dystrophy is, because it can happen to any family on any given day. Nobody is immune to it. And, like us, the shock of receiving a diagnosis like that, I think for one child is cruel, but to have more than one child with that disease it's devastating.
And I hope everybody will go there, follow you guys, because I love to follow you, but also because, one, I learned so much, as you say, as nurses yourselves, it's not something we speak about. And also, I think when we look at muscles, people often think of a bicep or abdominals, but they don't think of the heart as a muscular organ. And I just think it's so important. So I hope everybody will follow that as well.
Thank you.
Now, Paula, before we kind of go into your superpower, which obviously is the part of this, which is to pull out what makes you incredibly special. And there's so many parts of this of why you're such a special person. But before I go there, I've just got a few quick fire round questions for you, if I can. So, firstly, if you could invite 3 people to dinner, past or present, who would be at your dinner?
Oh gosh, that's so complicated and so difficult, because there's so many people that I would admire and have contributed to where we are today. Well, Archie's obviously there. He's here now. So I'm not going to say, he would be there, obviously. So I'm not going to count him because he's there. Okay. It's just a bit of a cheat. I think as a female, I have to think of a strong female. And there are lots. Is there somebody in health or... No, do you know who I would choose? I would choose Emmeline Pankhurst, one of the suffragettes.
Yeah.
Because I think Emmeline is somebody, and her associates, buddies, colleagues, they weren't just fighting for women, they were fighting for all of us. Because if women can have equality, we know that they contribute so much to the world. And if I remember correctly, I think she went to prison like 6 or 7 times for her beliefs. And I've been in trouble a lot of times for my beliefs, and for sticking up for what I think's right. So Emmeline,
okay,
I'd love to hear her stories. I think, after love and family and good health, the most precious thing we have is the planet. So I would say Sir David Attenborough. Oh. I'd love to hear, because he's a real visionary and still is doing the most amazing work. So I think he'd be a really great guy to have at dinner. And I have another saying as well as living the dream. When things are really difficult and people are in trouble, because I believe in God, I would say to people, what would Jesus say? So I think I'd invite Jesus.
Oh,
Yeah, I think I'd invite him,
yeah.
and I'd like to know what he thinks of the mess we've got ourselves into, and perhaps help us get out of some of that mess.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very eclectic mix of dinner guests.
Emmeline, Sir David, and Jesus. And of course,
And Archie floating around.
Of course,
Yeah.
is there. Love that.
Yeah.
And another one, Paula, is you've obviously, I'm sure you've heard a lot of advice over the years, some that you wanted, some that you probably didn't ask for as well.
Yeah.
What's a piece of advice that's really stayed with you? You've mentioned some already, but what's the best piece of advice that you've been given that we can take away?
I think, as I said earlier, how we function really is about our capacity on any given day. Do you know? So I think the best piece of advice really is to be the best version of yourself that you can be at any given moment. And that's going to fluctuate, all kinds of things. But I think if you have that in your heart and you can be compassionate to people, I know we have the Be Kind movement, but I wonder, should that have been Be Compassionate? Because if you're compassionate, you're automatically kind. Yeah. So I think it's just try and be the best version of yourself that you can be at any given time, I think.
No, I like it because I think some days you can be great version, the best of the best version of yourself, and some days you're not having a great day, but you can still give it your best on one of those days, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to switch just up a little bit to your superpower because, getting to know you, Paula, since we met in May of 22 and followed your journey, for me, it's quite clear what your superpower is. And it's a superpower that's clearly drives you every single day. And I think it's something that's also had an impact on those around you and on so many people. You're probably thinking, where is he going right this? But it's a word you've actually brought it up at least over 10 times in this conversation as well. And it's a special superpower because it's hope. I meet so many people, and it's so easy in this life, and things can go wrong, and we can give up and think, oh, it's the end of the road. You've constantly said that you are hopeful. Your community have hope. Every time that you've been given difficult news, you've continued to be hopeful. But for me, it's not just hope for yourself and your family. It's hope for others. Even talking about the planet and the future, you live with this visionary mindset that the world will be better. We've come so far in 13 years. Imagine the next 13 years. And I've chosen hope because you seem to use hope as almost if I can say this, a strategy for life as well. What does hope mean to you?
What does it mean for me? That things can change. That however difficult your situation is, that be the change that you want to see in the world. That things can always be different. And sometimes when you're in the hole, literally or metaphorically in a hole, it can seem really, really impossible. But, I think you have to look for the light. The light will always find you. Who was that famous person? It was it Leonard Cohen that said about, everything's cracked, that's how the light gets through, or something like that.
Yeah.
I think what gives us hope is that ability to believe we can get out of the darkness. Do you know, however, because the sun, whatever's going on for us, the sun will rise. And I suppose we have to try and rise with that and go with that. And we only have this moment. I used to say, we have today or we have this week. I think Archie's death has really made me understand. You and I have this moment. We don't know what's going to happen when we go out there. None of us know that. And I think it's about being the best that we can in this moment for ourselves and each other. Yeah. I think that would be I think that's what hope is, isn't it?
No, I love that. And it reminds me of, I think it's kintsugi, which is a Japanese art, which is, when we have something at home or it's a vase and you drop it and it smashes.
Yes.
Actually, what they do is they use a gold welding to put it back together and say now it's more beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's similar to, like you say, the light coming in.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm taking away here is even in those darkest moments, and there will be people listening now who are going through some dark moments, but just find that speck of light. And
Yeah.
it's the cracks that let the light into your life.
Absolutely. And that doesn't mean that, I am walking around and my heart is so shattered. But I hope that it can be an example that even when you are so broken, you are still of value and you still have worth and you can still make a positive contribution to life.
Absolutely.
I think that's it.
And my final question for you, Paula, is as we look at the years ahead, what's the legacy you want to leave behind? What do you want Paula Naughton and Join Our Boys to be remembered for?
That, even through the greatest adversity in life, you can be of value and you can have a purpose and you can make a change. You can change things and you have the ability, if you can build relationships with people, because that's the key to all of it, is that you can have a lot of influence, positive influence, but you have to make that decision.
Yeah.
You have to really make that decision that you're going to go out there and you will always have critics. That's the other thing to say. And I think you just can't let them into your head. That as long as you know in your heart and your mind that your motivation and your intentions are pure and for the good, that you can overcome the greatest tragedy and you can grow from that.
Yeah.
I think.
And I think, going all the way back to where we started here from the black doll and your dad and Cinderella, and what a journey it's been. You mentioned the 3 things that you were looking for in life and becoming a mother. And all of those have certainly been fulfilled.
Yeah.
Sure, it's not been easy at times, but you've had a tremendous impact on so many people. I know Archie will be here with you and so proud of the work that the boys continue to do. And I obviously follow Join Our Boys. I hope everybody will join them as well. And we'll do whatever we can in the future to help families see hope. But thank you for joining today. Thanks for sharing your story. And I can't wait to support however I can, that going forward.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Huge thank you to you, our listeners, for being part of our community by watching, subscribing, liking, and also leaving comments on all of our videos. It truly means so much to us and it helps us to grow the show, making it possible for us to invite even more amazing guests for future seasons. And if there's someone you'd love to see on the show, do let us know. Your suggestions help us bring on incredible guests that you really want to hear from. Feel free to leave those in the comments or send a message directly to me on my social channels at Gian Power. We'd love to hear from you. Have you found the episodes? How have they made you feel? Have they inspired you, challenged you in any which way? Share your experience. We always love to hear your stories. And we've got some super exciting plans ahead. And with your support, we can take the SuperPower podcast to even greater heights. So if you're enjoying the show, please hit that follow button on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you're listening. And hey, if you're watching on board your in-flight entertainment, remember to follow us when you land. Or if you've got Wi-Fi in the sky, hit that follow or subscribe button now. For now, thank you once again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the SuperPower Podcast with me, Gian Power.